What's up guys, you're watching Life by TCG. I've got a Pauper deck video for you today. As you can tell by the map, the deck is Burn. So, I haven't been playing this deck seriously too recently. I think the last big event that I've played it in was a PTQ online sometime last year. It was just the one just after the Astrolabe ban, and at the time I thought it might be like quite a good choice because I think the Stompy matchup is pretty good, and that was one of the only decks that got untouched by the Astrolabe ban. Like Tron got worse because it couldn't play that card anymore. Like the Boros and Jeskai variants got worse because they couldn't play that card anymore. But then, like, I did play against Boros and like the old style of Fangren Tron in that tournament, and the Fangren's pretty hard to beat when they're gaining like 5+ life every turn. So in that event I came 33rd out of 150-ish, 149, something like that. So there were three other Burn players ahead of me, like 17 behind. I just checked the record quickly before I hit record. So you might be asking, like, why even bother making a video for Burn? Like, all the lists are the same, right? Mine's different in like just a few key aspects, which I think are pretty important, and I'll just get into that now. So of course the deck has 4 lightning bolts. Every Burn deck in all formats will have the 4 lightning bolts. It's absolutely standard. 4 lava spike, similar deal, and the 4 rift bolt as well. Then the modern players can't use this one, but in Legacy it's standard, the 4 chain lightning. So these are like basically the stock Burn spells. There's no reason really not to play any of these. Then I'm also playing 4 Skewer the Critics, 4 Searing Blaze, and 4 Fireblast. So Skewer the Critics is a little bit situational. It can get stuck in your hand, but often it's not too difficult to cast, and then it's just another 1 mana 3 damage, so it seems good enough to play 4. Searing Blaze can be a little bit situational, like in some matchups if your opponent doesn't have literally any creatures, then you can't cast it, so that's not great. But that's really like the worst case scenario, and it's pretty rare that in Pauper your opponent isn't playing any creatures. And then in the matchups where it kills stuff, it like really gives you a lot of equity in the matchup, like versus Boros and Delver and Stompy, things like that. Searing Blaze is like one of your best cards, so 4 copies I think is a highly defensible choice. Then the 4 Fireblast, 0 mana 4 damage is pretty ridiculous. Just kills your opponent before they stabilize. The fact that it's 0 mana means like it's pretty hard to interact with a lot of the time. You can sideboard it out in matchups where you expect your opponent is likely to counter it or have ways to deal with it. But in game 1, when your opponent's probably not as ready for you, then it's one of the strongest Burn spells in the game, so 4 copies is fine. Then the last spells, I've got 4 Curse of the Pierced Heart. Not really a standard card for so I shouldn't say standard because that's a format on its own, of course. Not a typical card for the Legacy and Modern versions. Of course, in Legacy, if you want an effect like this, you can play something like Sulfuric Vortex, which is like generally much stronger. And in Modern, you just have like more other better options you can play instead. But in Pauper, you don't really have so many other good options for any more burn effects. You have to look for things like Flame Rift, 4 damage to both players for 2 mana, which is okay. But in some matchups you can get punished for dealing damage to yourself, so that's not ideal either. In general, I think Curse is pretty fine. There are matchups where you do need to become like a control deck, because when you think about it, Rift Bolt, Chain Lightning, Lightning Bolt, Skewer, Searing Blaze, even Fireblast can all be removal spells. So there are matchups or situations in certain matchups where that's the kind of game you should play. And in those situations you need a card that can accumulate a lot of damage over multiple turns. So Curse of the Beast Heart is just sort of the best tool for the job that we have in Pauper. So far all of this is pretty stock. You might not see lists playing all 4 Skewer sometimes, but yeah, that's just what I have. So pretty much all 4s. Then the creatures is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So for Ghitu Lavarunner, this stock basically. It got a little bit worse when they banned Gitaxian Probe, but it's still like the best 1-drop the deck can play. So there you go, 4 of that. Then also for Thermo-Alchemist, this card is one of the more swingy cards the deck can play. Because it's a 2-mana creature, it doesn't do anything unless you untap with it. It's like one of the most easy cards in the deck to interact with. It feels really bad when you you cast it and then they just deal with it for 1 mana with a bolt or something. When you instead of this, you could have played like even Incinerate or something, just incinerate the opponent's face. Then that's 3 damage that they couldn't have interacted with. And in some situations, a simple card like that will just be better than Thermo-Alchemist. But the upside of Thermo-Alchemist is that often if you do get 1 turn to untap with it, it will do that 3 or so damage straight away. And then it stays around dealing more damage. It can block small creatures on the ground. Yeah, so the ceiling is very high, but the floor is very low. Some people are experimenting with cutting this, or they recommend cutting it, but I don't think that's correct. Just the power of it is too high in the matchups where it sneaks through removal, where your opponent kept an awkward hand and they couldn't necessarily deal with it. And then the last 4 spells I have in the list, this could already be a pretty stock burn list so far. And then you would be expecting these last 4 cards to be 4 Needle Drop. I'm not playing Needle Drop, I don't like it. What I'm playing instead is 4 copies of Scorch Spitter. So this is a relatively new card from the latest core set. What it does, it's a 1 mana 1/1. When it attacks, it deals 1 damage to the opponent. So it's similar to a lot of cards that black can play, like Pulse Tracker or Night Market Lookout. It's effectively just like a 1 mana 2/1, which on its own you might think that well, that card's just not very good, right? When you think that black has had access to like so many creatures like this for a long time, and you know there's no deck featuring like Carnophage and Pulse Tracker, and there's like a Pulse Tracker variant that's an elf, and you know all of these kind of cards. You know that's not a deck in Pauper, but the reason why that's not a deck in Pauper is because black doesn't have any good burn spells. Well, it can play like Bump in the Night, which is like the black lava spike, and then there's Tyrant's Choice is okay as well. That like 2 mana 1 that does 4 damage to the opponent. That one's alright. Then it really falls off a lot after that. Like you have the one that's like Lightning Helix that can only target the opponent. That's not very good. And then after that, what's left? Like nothing. So yeah, you basically become like a bad version of the aggro red deck wins deck at that point when you're trying to play black. It just doesn't work. But in the case of Burn, what other 1-drop creatures could you play? Like we already have Lavarunner, and if you go and look through all of the creatures that are legal, the only other ones that effectively attack for 2 in Pauper for red 1 mana, they're all stuff that is really conditional. So things like Goblin Cohort, Mog Conscripts, Jackal Familiar, like if you don't, like they either can't attack alone or they can't attack unless you played a creature spell that turn. And in Burn, both of those conditions are really bad. Like when you only have 8 other creatures in the deck and only 4 of them can attack, then those cards just won't even work. And then once you have eliminated all of those, literally the only other one that's left is Jackal Pup, which is 1 mana 2/1. Whenever it takes damage, it deals that much damage to you. So in like a very narrow situation, it can be better than Scorch Spitter because it trades into things that have 2 toughness. So for example, like if you can play it and block a ninja, or like when you attack into their 2/2 and they block, like it kills their guy. That's the situation where Jackal Pup would be better than Scorch Spitter, potentially. But the situation where Jackal Pup is worse, so if your opponent has like a Mnemonic Wall or something, if you attack your Jackal Pup into it, basically nothing happens, right? Like you deal no damage, that's it. Scorch Spitter will keep attacking for 1 effectively in that situation. If your opponent has like a 5/5 creature and you attack into it with your Jackal Pup, then your Jackal Pup will just die and then you'll take a bunch of damage. Whereas with Scorch Spitter, like your creature will still die, but at least they'll take 1 as well. That can be a pretty big deal, I think. Just the fact that like when they do play something that can answer it, you just squeak through like 1 extra point of damage. And then of course there's tons of removal in the format that's damage based as well. Not only like Lightning Bolt can be really bad if they bolt your Jackal Pup and it's a aggressive matchup, but there's things like Savage Swipe, which means you're taking 4 damage to the face, or even like Scred is a card that is played quite a lot. So you're potentially taking like 5 damage or even more if they use that to kill your Jackal Pup, and that can really like swing the tide of a race against you. So once you've eliminated all of those cards, like Scorch Spitter is actually the best other 1-drop that the deck can play, and having that extra 2 power 1-drop is like really good for just being able to curve out and deal like a lot of damage quickly and reliably. Like when you think about the burn decks in Modern and Legacy, they both have the exact same creature suite. They have 4 Goblin Guide, 4 Monastery Swiftspear, 4 Eidolon. I mean, obviously it doesn't translate exactly to these because all the Pauper versions are obviously much worse, but just being able to play like a 1-drop that can attack on turn 1, and then if they play their own creature, like you can transition into that like, okay, now I'm bolting your creature and I'm still attacking, and like the damage is coming, but I'm also like interacting with you. I'm not losing card advantage. I mean, I don't want to get into like nitty gritty of like how much that matters when you're playing burn, but like, you know, you have the potential of answering your opponent's plays while like keeping your foot on the gas with your attackers, which is not necessarily something the deck has really had access to much before, reliably starting from turn 1. You know, when you think about playing like a Lava Runner on turn 1, it might not even be able to attack for 2 until maybe the 3rd turn of the game sometimes, if you're going to play like a Curse or a Thermo-Alchemist on turn 2, because sometimes that's better tempo than just like double bolting your opponent's face. So in those situations, Scorch Spitter can be even better than Ghitu Lavarunner. Yeah, I'm super impressed with this card. And then I don't like playing Needle Drop just because I think it's like a really bad use of tempo in a lot of situations, to spend 1 mana just to do only 1 damage. Yeah, that's basically it. Like in some situations it's awkward sequencing, having to like play burn spells in a certain order so your Needle Drop is castable. It's nice with Thermo-Alchemist, but that's really like the only big upside for it. Yeah, I don't want to be having to spend a mana just to deal 1 damage in matchups where like racing is important. And then because like the curve is a lot lower, like you don't need to waste mana on things like Needle Drop that are like weird sort of like card advantage, not really, but 1 mana just to get like a free 1 damage, like because you're more focused on like being more effective with your mana. I'm only playing 16 mountains and no cycling lands, so you have like a very high density of action spells. So your average card is like much stronger. Your opening hands are like more potent because you have the more aggressive 1-drop attackers. Yeah, so that's the main deck. I've seen a lot of people that are like pretty skeptical of this. And in some matchups you do board it out, like when the fact that it's a 1/1 is a big liability, you can cut it, but that's not super common, and overall I think this card is really effective. So yeah, that's the main deck, 60 cards. Then for the sideboard, I don't have the full 15, but I will show you. I've got 4 Smash to Smithereens and 4 Martyr of Ashes. All 4 Smash might not be necessary. It's pretty good against Affinity and Boros Monarch and also Tron, but you might not necessarily want all 4 in any matchup except Affinity, in which case those extra copies are probably better served as being Gorilla Shamans, whether you only play 1 or maybe 2 copies of that. You just have to double check that how your sideboard plan works out. Then Martyr of Ashes, I think this card is just significantly better than Electrickery. Against the Stompy matchup, you basically want to go like full control mode, and then the fact that it kills X2s and bigger is very important compared to Electrickery, where it doesn't do that. Yeah, the only matchup where Electrickery might be better is against Delver, but I don't think it's necessary there. And then against Boggles, Martyr of Ashes is just like one of the only things that gives you a chance to win. Like your only hope is basically either you get like a fast Thermo-Alchemist and you just get like perfect sequencing and you race them, or you stick a Martyr of Ashes and you pop it in response to them playing their aura. And I guess Electrickery can do that too, but the Stompy matchup thing is too important, I think. And then for the other 4 cards I have on me to show on the sideboard, which again, like the Scorch Spitter, is a card that I think is very, very underplayed, is Orcish Hellraiser. So what this is, for 1 and a red, you get a 3/2 creature with Echo Red. So in the upkeep after it comes into play, you have to pay red mana or sacrifice it. And when Orcish Hellraiser dies, so either because you didn't pay the Echo or for any other reason, it deals 2 damage to the opponent. So basically what I use this card for is the same, like not exactly the same, but similar role as what everybody else seems to be using Keldon Marauders for. I just really don't understand at all why you would ever play Keldon Marauders instead of this. So like the corner cases where Keldon Marauders is better is that let's think. So like okay, well the first situation is that you get really punished somehow for having to pay the Echo, which is usually not a problem at all. Like if you have other 2-drops in your hand, like Thermo-Alchemist or Curse for example, you can just play those first. That way when you do play the Hellraiser, you don't have any more 2-drops left, and even if you only have exactly those 2 lands, you can safely pay the red mana and not be screwed on your sequencing. That's normally not a problem. So then the other bad situation for Orcish Hellraiser is maybe the fact that it has 2 toughness. So like you can play it and then your opponent can like firebolt it and it dies. Like that doesn't seem too serious. And like if you're attacked with your Keldon Marauders and they blocked it with like a Glint Hawk or something, like okay, your Keldon Marauders doesn't die in that combat, but it's gonna die in your next upkeep anyway when it vanishes, so like what's the difference? So that's not really that big of a deal. So like then you start getting into like really weird corner cases where like, okay, so you played Orcish Hellraiser and then you paid for the Echo and then you got 1 attack in and then they played a big wall, so it dealt 3 damage, but now your opponent can block it and you can't sacrifice it, so it only dealt 3 damage instead of Marauders, which would have done 5. Like this again, this is like a super really weird corner case. Like they didn't have the blocker the turn that you got your first attack in with the Hellraiser, but like then like the exact turn after, then they have the big blocker. Like it just doesn't really make that much sense. And then of course, if your opponent has the big blocker before you even get 1 attack off with your Hellraiser, then you can just choose not to pay the Echo, sacrifice it, and it does 3 damage. So it's the exact same thing as Keldon Marauders anyway. And then like once I've cleared through all these like weird corner cases, it's just a 3 mana, it's a 2 mana 3 power, and it shocks the opponent when it dies. Like the reason why you're not playing at main and you are playing something like Thermo-Alchemist in that 2-drop slot, or Curse for example instead, is because like there are a decent number of matchups where it's just easy enough to interact with this because it's a creature that needs to attack to deal damage. You know, and Thermo-Alchemist and Curse don't have that problem, but in many sideboard games, just having an extra sticky threat, you know, like against Delver, you're happy if this trades with ninja for sure. Like, Fairies can't profitably block it. It steamrolls through Augur of Bolus. And it just keeps coming like turn after turn. Whereas if you have Kaldheim Marauders, like they just chump it with Augur or whatever once and then it dies. It's really a lot worse. Same deal with Stompy. Like when you're playing that game where you want to kill all their creatures with your Martyr of Ashes and your all your bolts and stuff like that, you really want something that can stay in play and keep hitting them. Like in 2 attacks, it's already done more damage than the Kaldheim Marauders. Yeah, it's just like really a lot better. It's the same thing I think in the burn matchup, like in the mirror. Just having more creatures is a lot better. Like generally, creatures are going to be faster than burn spells, right? Like if you play a Scorch Spitter on turn 1, or your opponent plays a Lavarunner on turn 1, generally it's going to help you in the matchup to kill your opponent's creatures, because like that damage is going to add up really quickly. Whereas if you use that bolt straight to their face and you ignore their creature, like you're going to lose the race generally if you do that. So what tends to happen in the burn matchup is that you trade all your burn spells. Both players trade all their burn spells for creatures. So like when the dust settles, both players sort of like don't have that many resources left and all the creatures are dead. And in that situation, like the perfect card you want is just a creature that you can stick and start attacking. So again, like Orcish Hellraiser is really good there. Yeah. Like I'm just, whenever I see like burn lists in the leagues and the challenges and stuff, and they are playing the Kaldheim Marauders and they're not playing this, like I'm just eternally confused. Like it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. It's just such a huge upgrade in like the vast majority of situations. I don't really get why people would keep playing Kaldheim Marauders now that this card exists. Like if you have a good reason, like if you think I've got this like completely backwards, please let me know in the comments. Because I'd really like to know. But yeah, that's the other sideboard card. So I think four of this in the sideboard is pretty essential. I think 4 Martyr of Ashes is like probably up there as well, unless you think Stompy's really fallen off, in which case you can trim those. Same thing for Smash the Smithereens. Like I'd probably play minimum 2, but like anywhere from 2 to 4 is probably alright as well. And then the last few sideboard slots, I wouldn't play Molten Rain. I think that card's shit. The problem is that it's like 3 mana to deal 2 damage, which just isn't good enough in the matchups where you ostensibly care about killing their lands. Like Tron is just going to say like, oh thank you, you spent 3 entire mana just to deal me 2 damage. I'm going to untap and like Pulse and Marasa back whatever thing you just destroyed. Like I think it's slightly better against like Boros decks if you can hit a Garrison with it, but I don't think that's worth spending a sideboard slot on, and I don't even know if it's even that good in the matchup either. I would just really stay away from that card. Cards I think are good, like extra removal is fine. In the matchups where you need to be either totally focused or give more consideration to the game plan of burning your opponent's creatures, it can often be good to board out your Lava Spike and your Fireblast and stuff. So in those matchups, just having like extra burn that can act as removal is fine. So that would be things like Seal of Fire, Seal of Fire is good because obviously it's you play it down early and then the tempo for activating it is free later, so you can force the issue on like your opponent's punch spells and things like that a lot easier. Or if your opponent goes for like a spell starter play later on, like you have a free way to kill one of their Furies, that kind of thing. So Seal of Fire can be pretty good. Blur of Blades is also pretty good, because in these kind of matchups like Delver and Stompy and stuff like that, there's enough stuff with 1 toughness that usually you'll find something to hit with it, and the 2 damage at that point is basically free. Tireless Tribe's not really a thing anymore, but when it was, the -1/-1 counter is one of the only effective ways you have to deal with that card, so that's another thing to keep in mind. Incinerate, like I said before, it looks kind of stupid, but there really isn't any other like better rate. Like 3 mana for 3 damage for 2 mana is still like fine. And the flavor text on it, the fact that it stops regenerate, is actually semi-relevant, because one of the only ways Stompy can beat you is if they like get flooded into the late game and then they play a River Boa and put like a Rancor or a Hunger of the Hellpack on it. So having a way to like kill River Boa through that is actually like quite relevant. So yeah, all of those are like defensible choices. I've seen Razor Tip Whip is like another 5th copy of Curse of the Best Heart. I don't think that card is good. I think it's a bit like slow. When the land count is this low, you don't really want to be aiming for that. Spending 1 mana every turn to deal the damage. I think I'd stay away from that, but it's something to be aware of if you think the meta is like heavily biased towards weird control decks, but I don't really think that's something you should be concerned about. Pyroblast is another card that I probably would not play. Against decks like Tron, like you interacting with them is exactly what they want. And you can't use it to interact with the stuff that you care about, which is their life gain, so like forget about it. In the matchups where they are blue and you do want to interact with them, it means they're playing Delver, so you want to fight that with one of the other cards I talked about, like Seal of Fire or Blur of Blades. Like specifically Pyroblast only makes sense if you're afraid of like a blue combo deck that's faster than you, and that just doesn't really exist in the format right now. And like I said, if that does exist, you can probably find a thing that beats it that is like more in line with the rest of your strategy. Like if they're playing like Is It Blitz or like Tireless Tribe or something like that, like you have removal options that are better to deal with that. So yeah, Pyroblast, I'd probably try to stay away from that card as well. What else? Electrickery might be fine. Again, I just think like Martyr of Ashes is generally better, but you can play that alongside or instead of Martyr if you like it versus Delver, or you're more afraid of like Boggles compared to Stompy, things like that. It's slightly better against Heroic as well because you can hit Skyguard with it, but that's pretty fringe. That matchup's terrible regardless, so probably wouldn't care about that too much. In terms of killing 1 toughness creatures, another thing that I quite like is Fireslinger. 1 in a red for a 1/1 creature, tap, deal 1 damage to any target and 1 damage to you. So against Stompy it's fine, you know, like it pings face or pings creatures. Against Delver it's obviously really good. You just whittle away all of the Furies. Yeah, that card is pretty reasonable, I think, as well. Forked Bolt is another card you could possibly play in the same vein as those kind of like Seal of Fire suggestions. That's been made recently legal in Pauper 2 now, so yeah, you should have that one on your radar as well. Yeah, I think those are all of the cards that I like have considered or like would consider playing in Burn, I think. Or Flame Rift, yeah, I briefly mentioned that earlier, but I think Flame Rift could be like a defensible sideboard choice as well, just for some matchups where like you can't really interact at all and you don't want to, and you just want to try and kill them as quickly as possible. Flame Rift is something to be aware of there as well, but then you got to think like it's only one more damage than something like Incinerate, and that would give you more coverage in matchups where you want to use your burn as removal. So you know, you got to consider all of these various pros and cons. But yeah, so that's the two main takeaways for today. The Scorch Spitter and the Orcish Hellraiser. So here's the lizard. So yeah, let me know what you think about those two choices, whether you think that the Scorch Spitter is good, is the Hellraiser good, you've tried it and you don't like it, you're intrigued and you think it could be interesting, you've never considered it and you think it seems bad, like, I want to know what you think about it. Otherwise, I think I do think that these cards are like really solid in the archetype and they make the deck a lot better. I had a very good win rate. I mean, like I say, I haven't played Magic Online at all recently, but when I was testing for that PTQ, like I had a very good win rate with this deck in leagues, and yeah, like I say, I got like 33rd out of 150 or something, which is not ideal because it only pays out to 32nd, but I think it's still respectable. At the end of the day, like, Burn is still Burn. There is quite a bit of like nuance to playing it, despite what some people would have you believe, but it's still pretty exploitable, and it's not that powerful. Everybody's prepared for it, and everybody can beat you if they want to, so yeah, so while I do think this is like the best version of the deck, I wouldn't be super excited to play it in any important tournament. But you know, it can definitely do well, and by using these, I think you give yourself the best chance. So that's my little nugget of wisdom from me to you today. This is Life ITCG signing out.